The most important example of this for me is the Apocalypse of Abraham, written around the same time as the Gospels. A Jewish text which tells the story of Abraham, who hears the voice of God, and he's terrified and he hits the ground. And he hears the voice of God speaking to an angel. And he speaks to an angel saying, "Go, Yahoel," that's the name of the angel, "of the same name, through the mediation of my ineffable name, consecrate this man for me and strengthen him against his trembling. Through the mediation of my divine name," which he's given to the angel Yahoel. Yahoel, by the way, Yah and El. It is a substitute for the ineffable name of Yahweh, the writing of which is forbidden. And that's why he's called Yahoel. And in fact, at one point, God is himself addressed as Yahoel in this text. Abraham is told by this angel Yahoel, "Stand up, Abraham, go without fear. Be right glad and rejoice, for I am with you. For eternal honor has been prepared for you by the Eternal One. I have appointed to be with you and the generation prepared for you." So the angel, invoking the divine name, by the way, says to Abraham, "Rejoice, for I'm preparing for you, essentially, redemption, and it will come from your generation." And by the way, when Abraham finally stands up, one of the descriptions of Yahoel's appearance is that his hair is white like snow. Where have we heard that before? But interesting, isn't it? Let's think about the context of John 8:58. A lot of people forget that we're talking about Abraham. Why are we talking about Abraham? Why is it here that Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am"? Well, if I'm right that he is just identifying himself and the thing that's important is the Abraham claim, could this stem from a similar tradition? This is what Andrew Perryman has suggested recently, that when he says, this whole thing gets kicked off because Jesus says, "Abraham rejoiced to see my day." Well, hold on a second. In the Apocalypse of Abraham, the angel Yahoel says to Abraham, "Rejoice, for from your generation will come one who will redeem you." So is it possible that a common tradition has Jesus referring to the fact that Abraham rejoiced to see his day because he was promised this redemption from the beginning of time? It's possible. It's a suggestion.
Yahoel is an angel that gets a name in pseudepigraphical literature. You'll notice the name Yah, it's short for Yahweh, that actually occurs in the Old Testament. El, of course, another name for God. So we have an angel that bears two divine names. And Abraham is commanded to worship God in one text. And here, Yahoel appears to be the God of Israel, because look at all these titles: Eternal One, Mighty One, Holy El, God, Autocrat. You get to the verse 13, El, Yael. Okay. But you have other passages that sort of muddy those waters. The same figure appears in life of Adam and Eve. They, the angels, came to God and said, "Yael, eternal King, command that fragrant incenses from paradise be given to Adam." Here, Yael or Yahoel looks like the God of Israel. But here, in a third passage, they're distinguished. "I heard the voice of the Holy One speaking." Okay, now this is God speaking. "Go, Yael, of the same name, through the mediation of my ineffable name." So God is commanding Yahoel to do something. So they're different characters now, even though Yahoel has all those attributions, all those epithets of deity, of the God of Israel. "Lo, I am sent to you to strengthen you and to bless you." The last line in bold there, "I am Yael, and with me Michael blesses you forever." Isn't that interesting? Michael's distinguished. So in heaven, according to this writer, you've got God, this Yahoel guy, and Michael. The three of them are distinguished. But one of them is described in the same terms that you would reserve for the God of Israel. So you have the God of Israel and then like another one, or what? And what's going on here? That's the point. There's a lot of confusion. To us it's confusion, and to them I'm sure they wrestled with it. But there's a lot of effort being put in to identifying who is actually at the top in heaven, and yet they're Jews. You would think, well, that shouldn't even be a question.
I have the Apocalypse of Abraham open here, and just for the sake of the listeners, as section or chapter 21 begins, it says, "And God said to me," again Abraham is the speaker, "Look now beneath your feet at the firmament, can't understand the creation that was depicted of old. So, what David is describing, and that's right out of the text here.
Yeah, he's literally above the firmament. So in chapter 20, the eternal mighty one said to me, it starts, and the eternal mighty one is this figure, and this is very clear that Apocalypse of Abraham, amongst many other texts, as we'll see, the eternal mighty one is this word of Yahweh figure who comes to Abraham in Genesis 15. So these aren't just some sort of prophetic word that comes to him, and it's a person, it's a figure, in this text, the eternal mighty one. So the eternal mighty one has taken him on this journey, like the great angel tradition, or this second power that we've talked about before, as a background to early Christology. But here in this text, we'll just focus on it. It says, the eternal mighty one said to him, and this is in the context, remember, of him being taken outside. It says, Abraham, Abraham. And I said, here I am. And he said, look from on high at the stars which are beneath you, and count them for me and tell me their number. So again, we see the taking him outside and looking at the stars.
He's really outside.
Yeah, he's not just outside; he's outside the firmament. And so this taking him outside and the looking down, habet, can be taken as, this is probably where it's coming from. The Hebrew can actually easily be taken that way. It can mean from looking from up to down. It's used that way in the Proverbs. So when you pair that with being taken out and looking down and seeing the stars, that's one way. That is an actual legitimate translation of the Hebrew. It's really interesting that they would interpret that. Well, clearly this is an apocalypse. Now, mind you, Genesis says that Abraham was a prophet. Obviously, he's seen the whole Exodus. He's seen his seed. He's seen the 400 years. He's promised he's seen the conquest. He's seen all that stuff in Genesis 15. So much so that later traditions would say he's seen the end. Like the Apocalypse of Abraham and others. And even in the Gospel of John, you have Jesus saying, Abraham has seen my day and rejoiced. And so there's this tradition that a lot more was revealed to him than we think, even eschatologically.
So you're saying, Abraham has seen my day. That very well could be a, for us, cryptic reference to Abraham has seen my coming.
Yes.
Essentially my incarnation and what I'm about to do and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's interesting.
And incorporating it into the whole narrative, because I don't want to get off on John right now, but if we were to go to that, you'd have to say, well, new creation there, conquest of the powers, all that kind of stuff would be included in that. So in the day, because, when you think of what Abraham was actually saw and what he was actually promised, even in his deep sleep, just in the context of that vision in Genesis 15, he saw he was promised the coming Exodus, the conquest of the lands, and that's the end of Torah. He's seen the end of Torah, and for many Jews, especially in the Second Temple period, we have enormous evidence for this, especially in Josephus. We're reading the Torah eschatologically. And so the Torah is sort of the framework of all of history. It's not just ends just before the conquest. It's that within Torah encapsulated the history of the world. So if Abraham has seen sort of the ends of that, then he must have seen the end of the world. Especially when you have the prophets, when they talk about the eschaton, it's a new Exodus. It's a new conquest of the powers. Sure. So it would be perfectly normal, actually, in the apocalyptic tradition, to assume that Abraham must have saw the end. So that's really significant.
Prominent angels as second Yahweh figures. In chapter 3, we discuss the identity of the Old Testament angel of Yahweh as Yahweh himself in human form. This angel, in conjunction with the Old Testament name theology, was the foundation behind later Jewish speculation as to the identity of the second Yahweh, or second of the two powers in heaven motif, in Second Temple literature and Rabbinic Judaism. The most important study of Second Temple literature with an eye toward this issue is that of Charles Gieshin, whose research reveals that writers of the period cast both exalted, glorified humans and angels as the second power in heaven. Criteria for the second power can be summarized as follows. There are 5 criteria that scholars agree merit special consideration when seeking to understand exalted vice-regency. 1. Divine position. Is the figure with or near God and his throne? 2. Divine appearance. Is the figure described in the same ways as God's physical form in the Hebrew Bible? 3. Divine functions. Does the figure perform actions typically ascribed to God? 4. Divine name. Does the figure bear the name of Yahweh, or is he described as a hypostasis of the name? Note: it is recognized that hypostasis nomenclature has been criticized by scholars in the past. However, the criticisms have been carefully addressed in recent work on Jewish angelology and divine mediation. End note. And 5. Divine veneration. Is the figure worshipped, or is prayer offered to the figure? With respect to the last criterion, the exaltation of a figure most often has its roots in Exodus 23:20-23, Exodus 24:9 and forward, Daniel 7:9 and forward, and Ezekiel 1:10. It is not a coincidence that these texts are precisely those at the root of the two powers controversy, since they evince a second divine personage. For our purposes, we will focus on angels who fit the criteria most closely. Note: Metatron deserves special mention, despite exclusion from our discussion. Metatron is arguably the capstone of vice-regent traditions, since he bears the name Yahweh HaKatin, the Lesser Yahweh. Much of the material for Metatron is found in 3rd Enoch, written in Hebrew, which scholars date from the 2nd to 5th centuries AD, outside the normative parameters of the Second Temple period. 3rd Enoch also has detailed divine council scenes, demonstrating that divine plurality and two powers theology was alive and well in the rabbinic period. End note. In Joseph and Aseneth's visitor, the heavenly man, is referred to as a god, theos, 2 times, and yet he is distinguished from God by virtue of his titles, chief of the house of the Lord and commander of the whole host of the Most High. Many scholars believe the heavenly man is Michael, though the text never says this, nor is Michael ever referred to as theos in any Second Temple text. Note: several manuscripts of this passage show that some scribes were offended by the content. In some manuscripts, a scribe added the definite article before theos, apparently trying to cast the figure as God himself and remove the reference to a second deity figure. Other manuscripts read angel in place of theos. End note. In making the argument for Michael, scholars take note that the heavenly man is called archistrategegos in this passage, which is the term used in the Septuagint for the commander, prince, Sar, in Joshua 5:14. However, the same title is also used of Raphael, a slightly later text. Note: the Greek Apocrypha of Ezra dates from the 2nd to the 9th century AD. End note. And Michael's military functions are not unique to him, being shared by other archangels. Note: the closest any Second Temple text comes to deifying Michael is either 1 Enoch 40:1-9 or 69:13-25. The former texts refer to the 4 angels of the presence and goes on to list Michael as the first. This descriptive phrase is then taken to Jubilees 1:27-2:2, where an unnamed angel of the presence is clearly identified as the angel who went before the camp of Israel, in other words, the angel of Yahweh. This strategy, therefore, produces an argument from silence. The second passage has Michael being asked to reveal the hidden name of God. The speculation is that Michael must be at the level of Yahweh to know this information. End note. A deified figure distinct from Michael does appear in Second Temple literature. And it came to pass, when I heard the voice pronouncing such words to me, that I looked this way and that, and behold, there was no breath in me, and my spirit was amazed, and my soul fled from me. And I became like a stone, and fell down upon the earth, for there was no longer strength in me to stand up on the earth. And while I was still face down on the ground, I heard the voice of the Holy One speaking, Go, Yael, of the same name, through the mediation of my ineffable name, consecrate this man and strengthen him against his trembling. The angel he sent to me in the likeness of a man came, and he took me by my right hand and stood me on my feet, and he said to me, Stand up, Abraham, friend of God who has loved you, Let human trembling not enfold you. For lo, I am sent to you to strengthen you and to bless you in the name of God, Creator of heavenly and earthly things, who has loved you. Be bold and hasten to him. I am Yael. Stand up, Abraham. Go boldly, be very joyful and rejoice. And I am with you, for a venerable honor has been prepared for you by the Eternal One. Go, complete the sacrifice of the command. Behold, I am assigned to be with you and with the generation which is predestined to be born from you. With me, Michael blesses you forever. Be bold. Go. Apocalypse of Abraham 10, 1-7, and 15-17. The passage is noteworthy since the angel in view bears the name of God, Yael. Yah is El. He appears as a man and is explicitly distinguished from Michael. Not only does this angel bear the divine name, but readers learn later in the same work that Yael is the God of Israel. In the Apocalypse of Abraham 17, 4-13, Abraham is commanded to worship God on the place of highness by reciting a song listing God's names. Abraham obeys with these words: Eternal One, Mighty One, Holy El, God, autocrat, self-originated, incorruptible, immaculate, unbegotten, spotless, immortal, self-perfected, self-devised, without father, without mother, ungenerated, exalted, fiery, just, lover of men, benevolent, compassionate, bountiful, jealous over me, patient one, most merciful, Eli, eternal, mighty one, holy, Sabaoth, most glorious El, Yael. Chapter 17, verses 8-13. The point to be made is that the litany of names proclaimed to God includes Yael. The co-identification of this angel with God himself is echoed in the life of Adam and Eve. God is, once again, addressed as Yael. When the Lord had said these things, he ordered us cast out of paradise. And your father Adam wept before the angels opposite paradise. And the angels said to him, What do you want us to do for you, Adam? Your father answered and said to the angels, See, you are casting me out. I beg you, let me take fragrances from paradise, so that after I have gone out, I might bring an offering to God, so that God will hear me. And they, the angels, came to God and said, Yael, eternal King, command that fragrant incenses from paradise be given to Adam. And God ordered Adam go, come that he might take aromatic fragrances out of paradise for his sustenance. When the angels allowed him, he gathered 4 kinds, crocus, nard, reed, cinnamon, and other seeds for his food. And he took these and went out of paradise, and so we came to be on the earth. Life of Adam and Eve, 29, 1-6. It should be apparent that Second Temple angelology bears a strong resemblance to the Old Testament theology of the heavenly host. As we'll see, and as many readers have no doubt discerned, Second Temple thoughts about angels also have clear connections to the New Testament.
Later, in the void.
Let me put it this way. What interpretation other than the one that I've just described of Daniel 7 could the high priest have that would cause him to accuse Jesus of blasphemy based on the words that he said?
As far as you can tell in commentary, they can't figure out what it means, right? And so the question is, how is the high priest interpreting what Jesus is saying? So how are they interpreting what Jesus is saying?
And Jesus is identifying himself as the Son of Man, who they already expected to come from Daniel 7, and they interpret that as him claiming to be Yahweh?
It really looks like
because
that.
Because I think that's what you have to say, right? You have to say that they think he's claiming to be Yahweh. But in order to say that, you have to believe that that is how he interpreted Daniel 7.
Look, no, I don't. He could have a range of interpretations and say, like put it this way. Look at what the high priest is doing when he says, don't keep us in suspense any longer. Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?
Yeah.
He's asking for clarification on what he's saying. What are you saying? What are you telling us?
Okay, so bearing in mind that one interpretation of Daniel 7 throughout history, even after the advent of Christianity, is that Daniel 7 is a messianic prophecy about the coming Messiah. If Jesus is asked, are you the Messiah? And he responds by quoting Daniel 7, if one of the interpretations of Daniel 7 is that it's talking about the Messiah, then why would they not just think he was claiming to be the Messiah?
I'll tell you what kind of an answer it was. It was a punch in the face, is what it was. He's saying, I am the Son of Man. And this is Jesus' favorite title for himself through the New Testament. Most of the time, it's just a reference to being the human one. But isn't that kind of curious? I mean, honestly, if you met a guy at work that referred to himself as the human one, wouldn't you think he was a little odd? Well, like, no kidding. You know? Most of the time, it's a reference to humanity. But here, he quotes Daniel 7, point blank, and he puts himself in it. And Caiaphas gets it immediately, because look at what he does. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy." He just made himself the second Yahweh. He just made himself the second power. What further witnesses do we need? You have now heard his blasphemy. Caiaphas isn't saying, "Oh, we got to get rid of this guy because he called himself human." What? No, we got to get rid of this guy because he just called himself the second Yahweh. He's claiming to be God. I mean, it's easy to see when you have the backdrop that the first century Christians did. Now, what I'm not claiming is I'm not saying that in the Old Testament you have a full-blown, full-orbed Christology, Trinitarian Christology like we think of. There are hints of Trinity in the Old Testament. It's easy to show two. There are hints of three. All I'm saying is that the Jews, the Jewish people, it was part of Judaism to have a Godhead. It comes right out of the Old Testament, right out of Israelite religion. And when Jesus comes along, we need to view him, and they did view him against the backdrop of the Old Testament. When Jesus starts going around saying some of the things he's saying, some of it falls, on deaf ears on our end, not because we don't care, but because we just lack the connections. But when they heard him say things like, calling himself the Son of Man, and this or that quotation, they knew exactly what he was saying. And some of them believed it, and others didn't. Some of them were really offended. The problem was not the two powers teaching. The two powers teaching was part of Judaism. What made it indigestible is that this candidate for the second power, according to the New Testament writers, was not some dead guy from the Bible, from the Old Testament. The guy lived thousands of years ago. Well, yeah, he sounds like a good candidate. Wonderful. Whatever. Instead, this was a guy who was alive now and who was doing things that were pretty spectacular. And not only that, but he was running against the grain of the religious authorities of his time, in his tradition. And he's claiming to be the one that they've been speculating about for centuries. That was a little hard to take. The other problem was, to be that person, he had to have been born, you had to have Yahweh born of a woman. In other words, he had to be human with all of the frailties associated with it, with all of the somewhat distasteful things associated with it. Jesus had to be potty trained. Jesus puked up his lunch from time to time. Okay, he just did the things kids do because why? He was human. We know he could bleed. We know he could die. He was human. He wasn't like mostly human. It's not Princess Bride theology. Okay, he was human, all right? He's whole. And that really bothered people. But how could God stoop to that? I'll throw in a third thing. The other problem was the crucifixion. Because if you're trying to convince a Jewish audience of this after the crucifixion, they have to say, in order for them to look at you and say, I believe it, I think you're right, they would have to get over the hump of acknowledging that, we just killed him. Boy, that was a big mistake. That sure looks like a boo-boo now. And Peter is real quick in Acts chapter 2 to confront them with just that. But he's also just as quick to say, this was part of God's plan. You didn't realize it, but you're still accountable. You did it. And you had to get over that hump. And that was a little too much for a lot of Jews to accept. But many Jews did. Many Jews could look at Jesus and say, this is entirely consistent with what we see in the Torah, with what we see in the Tanakh. It's not a big leap. We're willing to take that leap that it was this one and not these other ones.